we have one portion of Kelso that's zoned as heavy industrial. It's called Anchor Point. I would like to see a couple hundred jobs come to Anchor Point, and we've had people come and talk to us about it. And
welcome, Mike Karnofski, to City Serves Leadership Podcast. I am so excited about today because this is a really different conversation that we'll have going on. You're used to having conversations with people who are city employees, city leaders, and talking on behalf of the city. I'm sure that will happen today too. But I think you're just a cool guy. I like the way that our conversations have gone as we've developed a relationship, and I just appreciate the fact you're here today. So maybe you could tell people a little bit about who you are, and you're a Kelso kid from the ground up.
Yeah, I can do that, and thanks for inviting me, Jeff. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about Kelso and also Cowlitz County and the other cities, because it's important to me to have a good community where people want to come and live, raise their families, bring their businesses, invite their friends, come for some kind of activity and drop some money in Cowlitz County or the cities. So, I grew up in Kelso, actually, in West Kelso, and went to Kelso schools, went off to college for 5 years, got my degree in chemistry and then one in forest resources, and worked in Shelton in a research laboratory for a couple of years, and at 37 years at Weyerhaeuser in a variety of jobs. Good place to work, learned a lot, and one of the jobs I had there, even though I have a technical background, I also have an MBA, but I was the regional HR manager, and I think that really helped me in a lot of ways, understanding the problems that people have, how you're going to deal with them, what you can do. Variety of backgrounds. There was an opportunity to put my name in for a county commissioner. I did that, and I was appointed a county commissioner, and then spent 6 years as a county commissioner, and then lost an election, but I decided I still wanted to make a difference in my community, and one way was to run for city council. So I've been on city council about 6 years, presently the mayor. But in a city manager form of government, the mayor is more ceremonial position and functional position. And during that time, I also raised 3 children, married, raised 3 children. They all have moved away, which is not unusual for people here. Yeah. And then, work on a variety of other activities in the community.
You were a commissioner for how many years?
6.
6 years? 6 years for both, about the same amount of time. So in looking at leadership at the level of being a commissioner and being the mayor, what are the biggest differences between those two things?
Well,
those two roles,
First of all, being in leadership, there's a lot of similarities, whether you're in industry, a community service activity, elected official. And to me, that's generally an organization, everybody has the same goal for the organization. When I was involved in union management negotiations, we all had the same goal. We wanted the company to be successful. At the county, we wanted the county to be successful. At the city, we want the city to be successful. There's maybe different ways you think of how you can get there, but you want the same goal. So one thing you need to look at is working with people, understanding their position, and then looking at how we can get to the same goal.
Yeah.
But functionally, the county commissioners are both the legislative body and the executive body of the county. So they pass the laws, agree on the budget, do all the functional things, but then they also have the responsibility for carrying those activities out as the executive branch. So, and there's only 3 commissioners. Right. So as one of the 3 commissioners, you actually have a lot of authority to get things done. that's a significant difference, especially in the city manager form of government. And there are legal restrictions on what the council can do. The council in a city manager form of government actually only has one employee that they're responsible for. That's the city manager.
Right.
We have no authority with any of the other city employees. We set the budget, we set policy, so we're more of a policy making, directional determination, maybe the bigger projects, but the city manager carries them out at the support and direction of the council. And so that's a significant difference. So you no longer have the direct responsibility like a commissioner. And so it makes it a little bit different, kind of often frustrating sometimes, because there's things that as a counselor you may want to do, but you need 3 other votes on most councils to get the majority, and then you work through the city manager to get those activities done.
And Longview and Kelso both share that same managerial style in their city government, although the rest of the cities in Cowlitz County are different, right?
Yeah, they're Longview and Kelso, you're correct, are city manager forms of government, and the other 3 incorporated cities, Kalama, Woodland, and Castle Rock, have a strong mayor form.
And you meet as mayors once a month, so it's not like you'd get very far away from either form of government. I imagine there are times when it's helpful to have somebody with a different perspective than you do in those monthly meetings, just talking about what it's like to be a leader in the city.
Oh yeah, it's really great. We've got a really good group of mayors we meet with, and you're right, we meet once a month. Certainly we talk about common issues. One of the latest common issues we discussed is the Humane Society is no longer going to provide animal control. And you may sort of say, yeah, well, but to a lot of people, animal control is a big deal. If your neighborhood dog's running around chasing your dog or your cat or whatever, and you call up, you expect animal control, and that's one of the general functions normally in a city is animal control. So we talked about that as mayors. We also have recently talked about the mental health tax. I believe most of the mayors are supportive of the mental health tax. Maybe for a selfish reason is we believe it does help reduce our costs, because if somebody gets arrested for a drug offense, they can take the alternative to go to drug court, so we're not spending money for jail. Because if the cities arrest somebody in their city for violation of a municipal code, they have to pay for that time in jail, and I believe it's like over $80 a day. So those are the kind of things we talk about. We talk about how we deal with our councils and how we deal with citizens, and try to understand how other mayors deal with it. And you're right, it's really helpful. It's a pretty diverse group right now. Will Finn in Woodland is a state patrolman, and Mike Reuter is a technical salesman. Mayor Hellenberg's been in construction. Mary Alice has done a variety of things. So we got a good group, and we have some interesting discussions. But in the end, we're all the same. We not only want the best for our cities, we want the best for Cowlitz County, because sort of what's good for one city in Cowlitz County is good for all cities. If Longview gets a new plant like the Divert plant, they're going to hire people from Kelso, Kalama. The work in Kalama gives people a place that they can recreate. There's a lot of people that work in Kalama come from Kelso and stuff. So I think we all understand that, and we work well together. But we are a diverse group, and of course the big difference is that. So in Longview and Kelso, the mayor is elected as he or she are a member of the council. So to a certain extent, we are council members that have sort of a ceremonial function. We represent the city, we run the meetings. But in those strong mayor cities, the mayors are not a member of the council. and they have significant authority for running those cities. And just in the state of Washington, the real small cities have strong mayors. Usually the middle population cities or city managers, and the really large cities have strong mayors. And it somewhat is a need for the administration in the cities. But even the smaller cities have their clerk or a city administrator who is somewhat like a city manager, but doesn't have the authority of the city manager because the mayor carries all the authorities.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because I was a pastor for 30 years. I know what it's like to wake up in the morning and the congregation to be on my mind. You know, different people in the congregations, situations that are going on, and how people are doing, and wondering if things are going well. You wake up with the community on your mind. That's got to be an interesting combination when it comes to thinking about your whole day and what you have planned ahead of you, and trying to incorporate people into that day in a really different way than most people would never think about what's actually going on in the city unless there's a problem.
Right.
You think about the city all the time. I know that just from having conversations with you. You are really well informed about what's going on at the level of city government. But you also are really well informed about what your city needs.
Yeah, and different cities obviously need different things, but cities also have the commonality is what's the most important thing for the citizens of your city. And there's actually two, but certainly the safety.
Right.
Personal safety. You'd want to feel safe in your city, so you have the police services, you have the fire services. In Kelso's case, we have a agreement with Fire District 2, so it's not a city fire department, but they do give us our response. But beside that, public safety, the other important thing is people want the infrastructure and the utilities.
Yeah.
When you get up in the morning, you turn on your lights. Well, that's a PUD, so we don't have a whole lot to do with that. But then you turn on your water. Well, that's a city function. You turn on your water. You probably have to flush the toilet. That's a city function. Maybe it's the day your garbage is going to be picked up. So you want your water to work. You want it to be clean and healthy. You want to have your waste taken away. So that's the basic responsibility of a city is safety, and certainly health, safety. And then when you drive out of your driveway, you don't want to fall into a pothole. You want a street that's functional. So you look at those two things, and all cities face those two things.
Yeah.
There's some difficulties in most cities with determining the priorities and the budgeting. But then once you get by that, then you get to other things that are important, but not the first and maybe the two top priorities for a citizen. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But in Kelso specifically, we are a low tax value city, so we do have difficulty, especially with roads, and get a little bit technical about roads. I-5 is a federally funded highway and state funded. There's Ocean Beach Highway, and it starts at I-5, actually goes Cowlitz Way, but that is a state designated highway. It's actually SR4 is the technical name, State Route 4. There's State Route 432 that comes over from exit 36. So we have a few state routes. Those are state funded. So then there's a next set of highways that's arterial highways that are some of your main streets, Tennant Way, Commerce. Those can get funds from the state and federal government. But then most of the streets in the city are residential streets, and they're responsibility of the city. So that's where we try to focus on those streets with our city money, but we also have to, do sidewalks and everything else. So that's one of the difficulties. Yeah. And then just locally, certainly Longview has had some problems with their water supply. Kelso has a different water filtration system, but due to the silting of the Cowlitz River, we have some problems. So that's going to be a big issue going forward on what are we going to do with our Longview. But another thing that at least Longview and Kelso do is we work well together. We take Longview water in an emergency. Kelso could supply Longview some water in an emergency. We have agreements with the police force that will cover for each other, and also Cowlitz County and all the police forces. So I think that's another important thing, that Cowlitz County does work well together in a variety of ways. And just the animal control, I know the police chiefs have gotten together, talked about how they're going to handle animal control. And in Kelso, we will hire an animal control nuisance officer to handle that. And I know that talking to the chief of police, Dar Kirk, who is a great guy, and he made the presentation at the last council, that every city will sort of have their own animal control, and maybe the smaller cities will share, but also they will rotate weekends then, so there's always an animal control person available, and we might get Longview's animal control person during a weekend. So, and again, I think that's one of the really great things about Cowlitz County is the cooperation we have between the county and all the cities.
Well, you do have a really unique view, having been a county commissioner. You have both perspectives, the countywide, and I think I've heard Mary Alice talk the same way. When she talks about Longview, she talks about it being part of Cowlitz County a lot, and I think that's we're not just sister cities, but we're part of a relatively close-knit county too.
Right, because Cowlitz County has about 110,000 people, but a little over half those people live in the federally defined Longview urban area, metropolitan area. So you have Longview, Kelso, but there's West Longview, it's in the county. Lexington would be possibly the third biggest city in the county if it incorporated, and there's a large population there. And then North Kelso is, a lot of that's actually in the county. So we do need to work well together for police safety activities, fire. Certainly the fire departments will work well together and cover. Probably the best recent example of that was the chip pile fire at Dynawave, where I think almost every agency in the county responded. But that's good, because it adds to the safety net of the people within the county.
I'd like to kind of focus a little bit on leadership, because one, this is a leadership podcast. I really care about leadership. I think that leaders share some things in common that we can really learn from each other, and we're really helpful to each other. And you've been leading for a long time. Well, obviously, if somebody turns the water on and it doesn't come on, you're going to probably hear about it. If somebody hits a big pothole and it does something to their car, you're probably going to hear about it. How do you, as a leader, approach problems? How do you, when you hear of a problem, that somebody presents you with a problem, what's your first thought, and how do you process that?
Well, I try to get the background, understand that, try to see it from their standpoint, that, you know, my water doesn't work today, and so, okay, well, you know, get some background. Then again, being a city manager for my government, always my first stop is to talk to Andy Hamilton, our city manager. That's his expectation, and that's the appropriate way to do it, rather than to have me call up Public Works. Is I say, okay, Andy, this is the issue, and sometimes Andy will say, I'll take it, and sometimes Andy said, yeah, go ahead and talk to the appropriate person. So that's sort of the formal way to do it. And there's some problems that people call up, and I have to say, I appreciate your concern. I appreciate your information, but I can't do anything about it because maybe you live in the county.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a PUD problem with your electricity. The city doesn't provide electricity. So those are somewhat difficult in just sometimes because certain problems people get really emotional about. I've had people call up and cry about their problem, and I'll have to say, yes, ma'am, I understand, but I can't do anything about that. Because you really have an issue in the county, or you live in the county, or it's public, and those are difficult. But
Yeah.
you want to try to understand the people's problem, emphasize with them, and say, yeah, I understand, and then do what you can do to solve their problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's relatively easy, sometimes it's not. But there's sort of the other end of it too, where I believe in the rule of law. We all may not like certain laws. I guess speeding's always the example, but you need to follow it. So people will come up and say, "Well, I don't like this happening," and sometimes you need to say, "I understand, but that's the regulation or the law. We're going to follow it." And I always sort of say, being a high school sports official and being an elected official has their similarities.
Yeah.
You have some people that see it one way, some people that see it the other way. Fans, players, coaches may see it differently, and as the official, you apply the appropriate law and make the call the best way you see it. So
But the official seems to
similar-
be the one that gets the heat all the time. I remember Little League, Central Little League, and we had to rotate through the umpire position, and I couldn't understand how these people in the stands right behind me thought that I should know everything about baseball and make every decision the correct way. And so I think sometimes people, like as a pastor too, people would have a problem and they'd come to me and say, "What are you going to do about it?" And I'm like, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Because we're all in this thing together. And I feel like that in the city too. I think a lot of times you probably get the first response from somebody is, as the mayor of the city, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And your response, I imagine, is pretty set. We're going to do this together. I've got people I'm working with. You care about the people around you. We're going to all get through this together.
Yeah, and I think that's really a good way to look at it. And also, let's say that it requires changing a city code or something like that. And that means that I need to get at least 3 other counselors to agree with me, because if it goes to a vote of the council, it would have to pass with a majority, and 4 out of 7 is a majority.
Yeah.
So, and again, all the counselors, we come from different backgrounds, come from different activities. We still have the one thing that's important to all of us is what's best for the city. So we have a really similar goal. We may have different paths and different views on that. So it's in a city government, it's not only working with the person and then working with the city, but I have some limitations working with the city because Andy is the city manager. So you need to get people involved to look at that problem. And then if it's going to take a vote of the council, you need to work with your fellow, and not to be sexist or anything, because we do have 3 females on our council, but you need to work with your counselors to understand how they view it and to ultimately see if they're going to agree with you.
Right. It's the whole idea of teamwork in a city is essential when you're a small city like this. None of us can do it by ourselves.
I think that's really a really important point is if you're a bigger city, the city council has a lot more power, a lot more authority, a lot more money. But sort of the smaller the city, the more important it is for not only the city to work together, but the school district, in Kelso's case, the fire district, because when we go to Olympia or ask for some money from the federal government, if Kelso, the city, went alone, and we didn't have the support of the school district, and a state senator, U.S. senator, whatever, says, well, what does the school district think about this activity? Well, they think it's really dumb. Well, you're much less likely to get it. And so each city handles it a different way. I was the public works director in the city of Woodland, and for interim time while they were looking for a permanent one, and they have the Woodland Quality Control, and so they get this port district, the city, the school district, the fire department, because Woodland also has a similar situation to Kelso where they use a fire district, not a city fire department. They meet on a quarterly basis. Kalama does the same thing, Kalama Community Coalition or something. They meet with that same group. Kelso, we meet and the school district hosts us. So the school district, the city, the sheriff is always there because Kelso School District has half of their grade schools in the county, and the fire district is there, and we meet once a quarter. Castle Rock does the same thing, and so again, as a smaller jurisdiction, it's really important that you're together working again on the same goals, the betterment of the community.
Yeah.
But then when you have an issue, you go forward jointly with trying to solve that issue, especially if you're asking for money. Whenever we send a request in for money, usually we're also asking the school district for a letter of support, and we've asked Longview for a letter of support for some Kelso activities, because again, as you get those groups together, you become much more powerful with a group working on the same thing. I think you probably see that in your life too. You have the ministerial association, you have a group of people. So if you're going to the city or to whatever, you take a group that says this is important to us as a group. And again, a smaller city, and Kelso's a smaller city, that's really important to have that cooperation, not only with the entities, Kelso School District, but the Port District, and same for Longview.
I think Kelso is extraordinarily fortunate to have you as mayor. I know that won't last forever. Everything has an end to it. But what would, as you look at what's right in front of you, Mike, what would you like to see happen? What would you like to get accomplished? Maybe what would you like to see unfold before you're finished?
I'd like to see some more tax base come to Kelso, and there's a variety of ways. We have a small industrial park, and really that industrial park is essentially full now. We don't have any lots available.
Yeah.
We have one company that's moving some of their operations from overseas, or their manufacturing from overseas. That'll come to Kelso, and that could be 100 jobs or so. So we need, more jobs for people. We need a larger tax base. I'd like to.
So how much would it take to make you happy?
Well,
what would you like to see?
We have one portion of Kelso that's zoned as heavy industrial. It's called Anchor Point. I would like to see a couple hundred jobs come to Anchor Point, and we've had people come and talk to us about it. And Anchor Point is on the other side of the railroad tracks at exit 36. It's right at the mouth of the Cowlitz River. One problem it has is it has significant limited access because you got to go over about 4 railroad tracks. So we've been working on that issue. We do have the property at exit 36 where they're in the process of building a 1.2 million square foot distribution and warehouse center. They don't have that filled with customers and clients yet. I'd like to see that filled to bring more jobs. I'd like to see something come at Anchor Point. Our airport's important to our economic development. You may not think so. You may not think about the airport, but There's a couple of local companies that fly their personal business jets in and out. When people come to look at siting a plant here, working with College Economic Development Council, they'll fly personal jets in there.
Yeah.
Every hangar at that is leased, and we have a year waiting period. We now have businesses coming in there to do maintenance and aviation associated work. The city, well, the airport's owned by the two cities in the port and the county. But recently they've signed an agreement so that high school kids can do the cooperative classes. They can go to the airport. They'll be able to get their pilot's license. So we need to continue to support that. We've got some housing coming in Kelso because we're going to build what's called the Hazel Street Overpass, which means to get to the area by the golf course and the area in that next to the river. We'll open that up. There's a 52-unit housing development that they've started across from the golf course. If we can get the Hazel Street Overpass done, we have a $500,000 grant from the EPA to look at cleaning up an old metals recycling that could be used for housing. So downtown Kelso, I'd like to see that improved, and we have the...
You've got like a shopping list of things you'd like to see happen.
Yeah, downtown Kelso, we before the pandemic, we started the Kelso Business and Community Association, similar to the Long Downtown, and we've just sort of revised it again and re-energized it. We had our meeting yesterday talking about activities to improve downtown. We're looking at having a trick or treat from 3 to 6 on Halloween, where the businesses will hand out candy and stuff. We didn't want to be in competition with the big one at Tam-O-Shanter, so we're going from 3 to 6. Tam-O-Shanter goes from 6 to 9, but we will get people downtown. We were talking about a lighted car Christmas parade, similar to the boat parades, and just having a parade there, and maybe being able to end up at the Rotary and the Lights in the Park activity. Maybe having some kind of restaurant progressive dinner. So I want to see downtown revitalized with businesses. But it's surprising because when we started the KVCA, I personally took a flyer to every business in what's our legally defined downtown area. And there's 41 businesses in that downtown area. You wouldn't think about that, but there are. And so want to see that revitalized, and that sort of raises everything when you get more business there. We have some problems with our motels. We've had people come to the Red Lion for one of our national or regional baseball tournaments. They walk into the Red Lion, they turn around and walk out. We need to have a nice place for people to stay, and it all comes back to ultimately the city needs to have a place where people want to live, they want to invite their friends, they want to bring in their businesses, and that's sort of the maybe the third leg of economic development, because that's important to all of us, and it's important to you as a pastor of your church. You want your congregation to grow and be prosperous, but you need an infrastructure, and the city, I think, does a pretty good job of providing an infrastructure, and you need a workforce that is educated. I think with Lower Columbia College, the school districts, we have a well-educated workforce, but you need a reason for people to want to come there, and that's that quality of place. To me, that's the most exciting thing I work on. I mean, water systems, streets. We need them, but the exciting thing is, what are we going to do to create that quality of place that people want to really come and stay, bring their families, drop a few bucks in the cities.
Yeah. Well, people could accuse you of a lot of things, but they can never accuse you of not knowing what's going on in Kelso and they can never accuse you of not being thoughtful and intentional about the way you lead. And so I'm really glad you were here today. I appreciate the time, and keep doing a good job.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You bet.